Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to The Takeout. I have lived in Washington, D.C. since 1991. I remember that first year in this city very well. For my career, it was nonstop exhilaration. As a resident, however, there was a different kind of rush. It came from a gnawing fear of violence. 504 people were murdered in Washington, D.C. that year, 1991. It was the highest rate ever. And for context, the murder rate in the nation's capital hovered for years around 400, and it didn't fall below 300 per year until 1998. The number of murders in D.C. in 2024, according to statistics cited by the Trump White House this week, was 186. To review, my first year in D.C. in 1991, 504 murders. Last year, 186. And we are now led to believe, in President Trump's words, that crime in D.C. right now is worse than it's ever been. When I moved to D.C. in 1991, there were straight-up no-go zones, places where cabs, remember, this was before Uber and Lyft, simply would not travel, not at any price. The city existed in a kind of numb terror. It functioned. People shopped, went to work, played in parks, but uneasily. Fast forward to last year. When this show was still America Decides, I was absent for 5 weeks. I served for 5 weeks on a D.C. criminal grand jury, reviewed evidence and cases for possible prosecution. Victims sat feet away from me in that grand jury room, trembling in fear from what they had been through: robberies, muggings, carjackings, shootings, and worse. I stared into the haunted eyes of crime victims in this city. Statistics about crime trajectories, up or down, are meaningless to an individual victim. The victim shudders over what happened to them, not whether that crime is on an up or down annual arrow. But statistics are important to a society, to a government seeking proportionality and assessing priorities, where to focus, what to do, for how long, and how do you measure success? How do you improve safety and preserve a sense of being? Here's a question. Do federal checkpoints for seatbelts accomplish any of this? Well, there was one last night here in the nation's capital. It drew protests from bystanders and disbelief from people inside their cars. Crime happens in Washington, but as the stats the White House posted this week clearly show, homicides in this city are down 30% from 2023. So by definition, things here cannot be worse than they've ever been. Justice Department reporter Jake Rosen joins me now. Jake, tell us what happened last night here in the city.
Sure. So we saw FBI Director Kash Patel announce this morning that the administration across its federal law enforcement officers had made 43 arrests, but 29 of those were immigration-related arrests, which means that the administration, in its capacity of using now federal law enforcement officers to conduct, whether it's these roadblocks, DUI, or car checkpoints, like you kind of pointed out, or throughout other law enforcement activities, have kind of expanded what we initially saw in the first 5 or 6 days of this, especially now that there is increased National Guard and law enforcement throughout certain parts of the city, to expand that to immigration arrests. And we saw the D.C. police chief today, Pamela Smith, announce that her administration and her department for the first time is going to be helping, not fully because there are certain D.C. laws that they cannot skirt around in this situation, but going to be potentially providing transportation for illegal immigrants who are detained by the Trump administration and these federal law enforcement from place to place, or potentially at one of these traffic stops. Like you just pointed out, if you see somebody is here illegally and you find information or believe somebody to be, you can then report that to ICE, which has never been done before in this city since those laws have been passed.
In essence, closer cooperation on this immigration approach. Where is the mayor of Washington, D.C., best as we know, Jake? Because this seems like a pretty fraught moment for the city.
Oh, it's certainly a fraught moment. And I think everybody's on the edge of the toes waiting for some kind of response from her. Well, tonight, her office tells CBS News in a phone call earlier before this that she's actually in Martha's Vineyard tonight. For a personal reason. She said there was a personal commitment that she had to make and that she will be back in the district tomorrow. Certainly on the summer Thursday going into Friday, questionable timing. And given the proportionate response of anger and outrage over what's going on in D.C. right now. For the mayor to not be here certainly raises alarms. After we've seen from politician after politician, they find themselves at times like this where it's just better to be here.
Based on what you've been able to assess, how would you say the city overall, various neighborhoods reacting to what has transpired to date?
Well, I think the best example is what we saw around U Street last night, where it wasn't just media and law enforcement that were showing up. It was hundreds of community members trying to redirect people away from this checkpoint and trying to basically shame or shout down some of these officers for doing what they were doing. But I think it comes at a time where there's just not quite a trust there between people who have lived here for a long period of time. When one of these pops up on New Year's Eve or July 4th, where there certainly could be more dangerous actions going on, certainly reasonable. When it's a Thursday night in the district and you're stopping cars and checking for more than just a broken taillight or somebody in an intoxicated driver, arresting people, pulling them out of their cars, pulling mopeds off the street, which is what we've seen all day today, Washington, D.C. police going and arresting drivers of those mopeds. I think it raises a questionable feeling of who is doing what, at whose direction, and for how long this is going to go.
Jake Rosen, thank you very much.